What's up guys, welcome to the channel. Today's video is going to be about the making of this wrap top, and for this project I'll be using 1 yard of this beautiful crepe fabric that I have right here. So let's get started. So I won't be using any pattern for this project. I'll be cutting directly on the fabric, and the full length of this top is going to be 20 inches plus 1 inch for hemming allowance. That's 21. So I'm just going to measure that and cut it out before I start inserting my measurements. So for a wrap top, I like to cut out the back piece first and then use it to cut out the front piece. So first I'll be drawing a horizontal line from the top edge of my fabric, and I'll be taking all my measurements from that line. So I'm starting with my neck width at 3.5 inches. You decide how wide you want your neckline to be, and I'm marking the 3.5 on that line. And on that same line, I'll be marking half of my shoulder measurement from the center back at 8 inches. And from that point, I'll be going down by 1 inch before connecting it to the neck width to create the shoulder slope. And now that that's done, it's time to start taking my vertical measurement, starting with my bust point at 10.5 inches. As you can see, I'm taking my measurements from that horizontal line. So I'm just going to square that point across before going in with my ruler to draw it out, and that will become my bust line. The next thing I'll be doing is to mark my upper chest line from the shoulder slope, and I'll be squaring out that point as well. So I'm just going in with my ruler to draw a line across that point. And then I'll be marking a quarter of my bust circumference on the upper chest line from the center back. This will enable me to create the back armhole. And to do that, I'll be connecting the shoulder slope to the upper chest line in a straight line like so. And then I'll determine the midpoint of that line before going in with my French curve to connect it to meet a quarter of my bust measurement on the upper chest line. And now at the very end of my fabric, I'm marking a quarter of my waist circumference, and I'll be going in with my ruler to connect that point to meet the point on the upper chest line. So now that that's done, it's time to add my seam allowance, and I'll be using 1.5 for the seam allowance along the sides. Note that I already added seam allowance to the length before cutting it out. And now I'll be adding half an inch seam allowance along the shoulder slope, and that will be all for the back piece. As you can see, I didn't cut out the back neckline just yet. That's because I'll be using this piece to cut out the front. I also didn't add any darts to the back because it's not necessary, as this is going to be a wrap top. So for the front piece, I'll be folding my fabric into like so. As you can see, this is much wider than the one I used for the back piece. And I'll be placing the back piece on it like so. Just make sure that it's long enough and wide enough. You can see the extra fabric for the wrap. So I'm just going to trace out the back piece on the front. So I've done that. I traced out the shoulder slope, the armhole, the center back, and the side. And this other part is the allowance given for the wrap. So to create the wrap, I'll be transferring whatever measurement I have for the waist, including the allowance, to the other side. So I had 9.5, and I'm going to be marking it from that line. The next thing is to decide how deep you want the neckline to be. So I'll be using 7 inches for my neck depth, but you can use 6 or even 8 inches. And of course, I'll be using 3.5 inches for the neck width, so it can match the back neck as well. So I'm just marking 3.5 inches from that line that is serving as my center front. And then I'll be moving on to create the front armhole. So from the shoulder slope, I'll be going down by 4 inches, which will be the midpoint. And from that point, I'll be going in by 3/4 of an inch. And then I'll be going in with my French curve to connect that point to meet the shoulder slope and the upper chest line. And now at the end of the wrap, where I will be attaching the belt, I'm going to be going up by 3 inches. So I'll be using 1 inch to hem and 2 inches for the belt. So I'm just going in with my ruler to draw out the 3 inches before connecting it to the neck depth and then connecting the neck depth to the neck width. So first I'll be connecting the neck width to the neck depth before taking it all the way down to meet that point. And that will be all for the front piece. So I'm just going in with my scissors to cut out the armhole, shoulder slope and neckline all the way down. So when I open up the front piece, this is what it looks like. This is how it's going to sit. So you can choose to make your neckline as deep as you want. So now that I'm done with the front piece, I'm going to be cutting out the back neckline, and I'll be using 1.5 for my neck depth at the back. So I'm just going in with my scissors to cut that out. So moving on to the sleeves, I already have a tutorial on how to draft a basic sleeve, so you can check that out. I'll leave the link in the description box. So I want the end of my sleeve to have an elastic, so I'm just going to be making that point a bit wider, and I'll be cutting out 2 separate pieces, 1 for each side. So the full length of my sleeve is 20 inches. It's meant to be longer than this, but I don't have enough fabric, so I'll be using 20 inches for this. And now for the belt, I'll be cutting out rectangular pieces 4.5 inches wide. I would have loved to have one long piece, but I don't have enough fabric, so I'm just going to be cutting out separate pieces and joining them together. So I've put the pieces together and this is what I have. So I'll be needing 2, 1 for each side, and I'll be folding it over to the wrong side like so and sewing on a 1/4 inch seam allowance from one end to another before turning it inside out. So I've done that and I closed one end and left the other end open. I'm just going to trim before turning it to the right side. So I've done that and I've also given it a good press, and this is what it looks like. So now that that's done, it's time to start putting the pieces together, and I'll begin with the back piece, and I'll start by finishing off the neckline. Now you can do this in 3 ways: by either folding it inwards twice, using a facing, or using a bias tape, and I'll be using a bias tape for this. So I'm all done with the back neckline, and I decided to hem the bottom as well, as you can see. And I also hemmed the bottom of the 2 front pieces because I'll be attaching the belt at once while finishing the neckline. So I'll be placing the belt from the open end on each of the front pieces like so before finishing off the front neckline with a bias. And I'll do the same for the other side as well. So I'm just going to be pinning it down before taking it over to the machine because this fabric moves a lot. So guys, I'm all done with the front neckline, and this is what it looks like. You can see how neat it looks on the inside. So now the next thing to do is to attach the front pieces to the back by stitching along the shoulder slopes. So I'll be placing the front pieces to the back, right sides facing each other, and I'll be sewing along the shoulder on a 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So I've gone ahead to do that, and what's left now is to attach the sleeves. So for the sleeves, I'm going to be folding it in twice towards the wrong side and stitching it down to create room for the elastic. So I've gone ahead to stitch it down, and I did the same for the other side as well. So now I'll be taking the measurement of my hand where the sleeve will be stopping, and I have 9.5 inches. So I'll be measuring 9.5 on the elastic, and I'm going to be cutting out 2 pieces, one for each sleeve. And now, using my safety pins, I'll be passing the elastic through the casing. So now that that's done, it's time to attach the sleeves to the armhole. So I'll be placing the sleeves to the top, right sides facing each other, matching the midpoint to the shoulder seam. And I'm just going to be pinning along that area. And of course, I'll be doing the same for the other side as well. And once that's done, all that's left to do is to turn the top over to the wrong side and stitch down from the end of the sleeve all the way down to the end of the top. And I'll do the same for the other side, and that will be all for this top. So guys, I'm all done stitching, and this is the final look. Thank you for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.